I have some theories running now around Rebecca's role that's going to be going on in this arc that are going to be heavily dependent on how Narrow goes about doing things in the next scene he's in, because realistically, if you have someone like Rebecca that can have visions of the future and have instances where she could change events that that Narrow already made decisions upon with his whole Emperor's Dice, like she does counter him, so she could be the key to defeating his whole like his OP future destiny seeing ability or whatever the hell Emperor's Dice do exactly. But for now, I just think the general setup that he has with her power is really cool, and I hope he doesn't abuse it. But this is a really good way to set it up for this arc. The only thing that I really would want to know is, because I brought up in the last chapter, if she had artificial limbs, couldn't she just use her ether gear anyway? Because Jin can. I don't know exactly how it would work, but what's the difference that would stop her from doing it if there's already somebody that can do it? I don't know. Like, maybe you'd have to go down that storyline specifically if it ever happened. I would imagine that Rebecca in the main storyline is going to prevent herself from ever getting her legs destroyed in whatever way that they were in that darker timeline. And they're mentioned that a lot of people on the Eden Zero crew died. It's just Noah and Shiki a lot older, and they're just explaining what happened. But Rebecca can't understand fully of what they're saying. It's kind of fuzzy, and then it kind of goes right back, and she wakes up. And her match with Lyra, that's what an area right now in the story I have a lot of questions about, because Lyra, could she be a character that is actually way nicer and not a full-blown enemy? A good comparison would be someone like Brandish, who Brandish isn't a part of the guild in Fairy Tail, but she is an ally through events that happened with the main cast during the arc she was primarily in. Whereas Lyra, she could be an example of not everybody within Narrow's empire are bad people, at least right now. Because she's challenging Rebecca to a game. Maybe it's not going to be some evil life or death game where she tries to kill her. Maybe it'll be a nicer game, and she could be a future ally, kind of like how Laguna actually is. I think is the best way to describe it, because Jin is pretty much solidified a member of the crew. Laguna is still in the gray area. But what's going on, Lyra? She's got Rebecca dressed up. She's going to be in her show, and they're broadcasting it. Again, I'm hoping that it's not going to be anything evil. I am hoping that Lyra could be an example of good people in this cosmos, and even in the not just the cosmos, but specifically people in upper ranks of Narrow's Empire. Because Milani is in that area where it seems like she's against what's going on, but she's still trying to do her job. But maybe that's kind of where Lyra's going to be at as well. But Lyra, I feel like Lyra's going to be way more focused and be a lot more tricky of a fight. But if hers is done more as a game, I think hers is way more likely to be an ally, because it'll be way less seriously paced, whereas Homora's was primarily combat. Meanwhile, the match with Weisz and Ase was really cool. I did really like that. It showed a lot about Weisz's now being more analytical side of things, as he's making a lot of just kind of general observations as they're fighting. And there's a point when he's shooting one of his ether blasts at Nase's Sea Devil mech that it bounces off, and obviously there's an ether coating to it, but he realizes that if he just shot a high enough amount, that it would eventually just overtake it, which is always something that you got to keep in mind. Things like that have a limit, and he understands that, but he knows that if his suit shoots that much energy, there's going to be problems with it. So he's thinking more intelligently in the fight, of not just trying to blast through it and then risking everything. But there's a lot of just really quick movement and kind of like plotting as their fights like progressing, and then Weisz is just using the OP nature of his ether gear. Jin is my favorite at the moment in the group of like the main cast, but Weisz definitely has my favorite ether gear because his is the most useful in like a majority of the cases within the series. And it's really funny to me that within Mishima's series, when people compare the characters that are similar, they don't go for like the reasons that I think would actually be like the most logical and the most effectively logical, because the ones like when you look at like the people like Seekheart, Jalal, Justice, and now like Elsie, it's silly because he's doing that clearly on purpose, and it's goofy to think he's not doing that on purpose. And then when he's got like mascots and stuff, when he's like bringing Plu over and now bringing Happy over to Eden Zero, as well as things like cameos in the background, he's been doing stuff like that. And then when you look at like the main cast, you see the differences like in Haru, Natsu, and Shiki really easily when you actually pay attention to their characters and see how their own individual stories go. But when it comes to Musica, Gray, and Weisz, their powers are very similar at a fundamental level. Like Musica as a silver claimer, and he can manipulate silver to essentially any shape that he could with as much silver as he could. Gray does it with ice making weapons and stuff out of ice, and to a degree so is Weisz while manipulating machines, while like turning them into anything that his mind can think of. It's really funny because like just at a core level he can take something that is similar and do all these different things with it, and have it deployed and utilized in a bunch of different manners. And I think that's one of the really valuable aspects of Weisz, and why he's got probably the coolest moveset of the team. Like, it's just generally the most valuable in like every situation that he's in. But I was happy that also Mishima showed the value of like the digital release setup, because if you looked at the fan translations before the Japanese translations and the official translations came out, yeah, you didn't get the full drawing of Weisz, because like Mishima decided to add in like I guess like last minute additional artwork on the forum, and he's got like these back spikes that if you look aren't in the fan translations, like these big weird rods that come out of Weisz's back that actually look really cool. And to be perfectly honest, like with that addition, he's got my favorite Overdrive out of the main cast so far. The only one I would say that I like more is Drac and Joe's. I think Drac and Joe's is really cool. He's just become this big alchemic dinosaur. Like, he's really weird looking, but I really like that. I thought his is really cool. But outside of his, I would say Weisz is my favorite out of the main cast. But his fight with Natsu was really cool, and his fight also showed like how OP his ability is in our world, because this is a sci-fi world. Like his power isn't like he's just using machines in something like in something like even comparison Fairy Tail and Rave Master. Like they have machines, but machines aren't crazy like abundant in the world, and it's not even like in real life like type series. Like it's not like My Hero Jujutsu Kaisen or something where it's like, yeah, it's like regular life. You can have machines but this is a sci-fi world. For the most part, machines are everywhere. He has like free manipulation of most environments that he's in. It's a really cool power, and it's really OP. And Shiki and like other people, they got like OP powers. Drac and Joe, they got OP powers. But I have to say, like, from a setting standpoint, Weisz has probably the most on the spot OP ability, because he's pretty much always going to be good in every scenario. Like even in small case scenarios, he's just gonna be a champion. Like Shiki could get so OP with like gravity powers, like that he could be like a monster. But something like machine manipulation in a sci-fi setting is just gonna be like in way more scenarios gonna be way more precisely OP and have way bigger utility. And especially in this fight, like he's fighting a mech guy who's got like this ether coating that nullifies ether attacks, and he's just able to use his mortal crash and then mess with the machine itself. So Nase's just broken out like the whole inner area of it. He's got part of it, but he's lost all defensive capabilities of the machine. It's just complete wreckage. And he's also like, oh yeah, I also made these like generators like messing with your like these signal jammer generators like messing with your ether gear all around. So too bad, like once I figured out how it worked, how it like worked with like electrical signals, I figured out how to beat it. And then his overdrive was done really cool because it was just in a way bigger set of the first real technique we get from Weisz with his million bullets. I thought that was really sick. And the form, especially with the back spikes. The back spikes, I think, definitely make the form really cool. He just had like a badass finish. Now, my opinion on Weisz having overdrive, because that's something I have talked about and I haven't really gone into that in this chapter. I am okay with him having it. Personally, I would not have liked him to have it in this chapter. I would have preferred him to win through the merits of the arsenal suit and not his ether gear. And I know he just trained his ether gear, but we know that he is extremely inexperienced in realization of his ether gear. Like he's really good with just like using the feel of it, but I feel like this was just a little fast. I would have preferred him to have just the ether lines, where the ether lines are starting to come off his like extend off his body, like when we saw Shiki versus Jin right before Drac and Joe showed up. Both of them had their ether lines extruding out their body, and we know the state after that from Shiki is overdrive. That ether line off the body is like just that in between of normal like ether gear and overdrive. So I would have preferred that personally. I just feel like this was really fast because now the only person that doesn't have overdrive is Rebecca, and I would have preferred it if Rebecca and Rebecca and Weisz didn't have it. And personally, I would have had it so, and this is just my personal take. This is just my personal say. I'm not saying Machine has to do this. I would have had Rebecca have the more extended kind of like where it just kind of like grows off of that like starting point for Rebecca, and then for Weisz have that whole ether lines off the body area, because now it's just Rebecca who doesn't have overdrive. I don't know. I don't like her just kind of like being by herself down there. In one way, but at the same time, now Weisz has already obtained this form, and he's got like an upgraded level of his arsenal suit as well. But the thing about that whole setting is, in reality, his ether gear upgrade completely overshadows the upgrade in the arsenal suit, which is unfortunate, I think, to a slight degree. But it's not a big deal in reality. The thing, though, that I really want Mishima to address, I'm hoping he does at some point, is the status of their overdrives. Because none of the overdrives we've seen from the main cast are nearly as progressed as what we saw with Drac and Joe. And we know Drac and Joe that Shiki defeated was way weaker than what he was in his prime. So we know that the Drac and Joe that confronted Jin and Shiki was way closer to the Drac and Joe that is at like his full power. And he casually went into his overdrive, and his overdrive looked way different than anybody else's. It was like his entire body was affected. And I still personally think that Shiki and everybody in the main cast, like that style that they have, is not full. Like it's like early stages of overdrive. I think they'll have later progressed forms where it'll take up full body versions similar to Dragon Joe's. That's just a theory. I know it's just something that I am kind of like formulating, but I want it to be addressed of like why theirs is also different than Dragon Joe's, because I feel like Dragon Joe logically speaking, somebody way more experienced with it going into a form that's clearly looks like it's in a further state of like where the overdrive area is like taking over their body. Because what Shiki, Homura, and Weisz all have in common is that like kind of like encroaching black and then their ether line kind of like color in like lining on their bodies, whereas Dragon Joe's was all over his entire body. He's able to do it entirely. So I imagine his is full overdrive. Like his is going to be way better. Similar to like if we saw Justice or Elsie use overdrive, I would expect theirs to be of a way higher caliber than anything Shiki could do. So yeah, overall I liked the chapter. The only thing I would say that was like my like kind of like about the chapter was that I thought Weisz getting his overdrive was a little bit too early, but it's one of those things where it's not a big deal. That just was like a personal thing I have. It's like whatever. I still like the chapter. I thought this was good. I really like seeing Weisz's power in action within the series and how creative he can be with it, because that's the fun part about seeing what characters like him can do with just a super flexible move set that they just need to be planning and kind of like scheming characters to get up a strategy. It's really cool when you have like a character be like a complete like badass in a fight and completely like wreck somebody, but having something like this where it's just Weisz outsmarting the hell out of Nase the whole time and then just pulling out his trump card and then crushing him was really cool. So at the end of the day, I did really like the chapter. I am really hesitant on like the fight where up and coming with Rebecca and Lyra, though. That's something I have on the back burner, because I am hoping that we can get at least one ally out of that. I like Lyra's design and I like her ether gear, so if anybody out of the oceans was a character that could become an ally to the Eden Zero, I'm hoping it's her. So we'll see how that goes. Maybe her fight with Rebecca will be way more tame, way less aggressive, and we could get a future ally, future friend that maybe could be like Laguna and join the Eden Zero. Because with just closing thoughts, because with Jin, I knew Jin was going to join the Eden Zero. So when the parts where Jin was showing up, I knew that was going to happen. Because Mishima does have things that he sets up in like a set of just kind of like common tropes that are in Shonen within a series. Like, you have that enemy that becomes an ally, like good friend character. In Rave Master, he had Let. In Fairy Tail, he had Gajil. And in Eden Zero, he had Jin. And one of the ways I knew that was just like thinking about that trope, and then seeing when he was doing Heroes, he had like a cover panel of Let and Gajil, and it's so obvious that he like, if it was a little bit further, like if he did Heroes like a little bit further in the storyline of where Eden Zero was at, he would have put Jin in there. And it's just one of those things, like it's one of those tropes I really enjoy. I enjoy it in all series, like Gaara is a good example as well. Mars is an example as well for Black Clover. Like, those are just Renji in Bleach. That's a trope I love. It's one that I'll never get tired of. I love it in series. It's such a it's like having the really powerful old dude. It's one of those ones you're always happy to see in shonen stuff, especially battle manga. But I never expected Laguna. I never expected Laguna was gonna join the crew. Pretty much, like, at least where he's at now, I assume he's gonna join the crew. I'm just waiting for whatever his character arc is that will tie him to the crew, kind of like what Jin got over on Forestra. So We could get that with Lyra, maybe. There's a lot of room on the Eden Zero. We can have a much bigger crew, but we'll see exactly how that goes. The difference between series, like, you didn't have that kind of like nearly as growing aspect of the main cast with Ravemaster, but with Fairy Tail, it was more about learning about the different members in the guild. A lot of the members of the guild already were in the guild by the time the series began. The guild got more members as like the series progressed, but a lot of the members you were meeting within the guild, specifically, not counting side characters and characters from other guilds and other characters throughout the series, specifically the Fairy Tail Guild, you had characters that already were in there from the standpoint of when the story began, when Lucy joined the guild and her and Natsu and Happy started going on adventures and stuff. You were learning about members within the guild, whereas Eden Zero, you're gaining members as the story goes along. Fairy Tail, like, from the standpoint of the main cast, you're getting the lore from like a hub, whereas Eden Zero, you're collecting